watching Notepad, and I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. Very recently, Plus Highway have announced that now you're going to use, or now you can use RFID facilities on all their highways beginning April. And of course, this has been celebrated by a lot of highway users because, as we know, Plus Highway is actually a closed highway system. And now, following this move, you can now use RFID and, of course, touch and go moving forward. On top of this, we've seen a lot of recalibration from the Malaysian government. We've seen the announcement of a lot of cabinet ministers. So all this and more is going to be discussed in tonight's episode. I have with me Syahrunizam Samsudin. He is the CEO of Touch and Go Senang Berhad. Again, thanks very much, Nizam, for coming over. You're a friend of the show. We've enjoyed having you over. Let's talk on the top, particularly on the mobility as a service. We're moving moving in the transportation business. This is the national automotive policy that has been announced. Plenty of things to discuss. Let's start with RFID.
Right. Thanks, Ibrahim. Thanks for having me on the show. RFID is, as the name suggests, radio frequency identification. It's a great start to building what we believe is the start of a connected vehicle movement, where the RFID sticker will allow users to seamlessly move in all highways. And linked with either an e-wallet, and in future with bank cards, people are able to use it without having to worry about reloading. They can do it online, and they can do it faster and better than they can do it today.
Yeah. How has the take-up been in terms of fitting it on vehicles? Is it hitting the target that you want?
We have about 1.2 million now users on RFID. And I think with the launch of Plus on the 1st of April, we are expecting that number to grow rapidly.
Okay.
I think intra-city to intercity connectivity is going to be key. So Plus will connect all the urban highways in KL. I think you're going to have a lot more out-of-towners taking RFID, and then we're going to see a lot more movement as we get to Raya.
There's also an announcement that outside of Klang Valley, you're going to be able to fit it as well, including that of the northern region.
That's right.
I'm sure that's going to be a huge sellout, a huge take-up as well.
Yes, we have started our operations in Penang, in Johor, and we're going to have at least 13 sites across the Plus highways to enable RFID users. So I think there'll be plenty of opportunities for our highway users to get on board.
So is this the death of the Touch and Go card and Smart Tag?
Yes, eventually that will be the goal. I think it's a natural obsolescence process. I think over the next few years, Plus, together with ourselves and other highways, are looking into creating the multi-lane free flow experience through RFID.
Yeah, and of course, there has to be a timeline in terms of the absolute death of, say, the Touch and Go card and Smart Tag. What's the expectations?
Right now, no, it's not this year. I think the dates have been bandied around many times. So I think we're looking at 2022, 2023, depending on the take-up. But I think the most important thing is we want to make sure it's inclusive. We want to make sure people understand how the technology works. They can use it easily, and then we can fix any teething issues we have in the meantime, and then we can cross over.
And of course, the big tie-up to this is the wallet, the TNG Digital. And how has that been in terms of growth? You were there for a bit, and then Ignatius is now there. How's it been?
No, the growth has been great. I mean, I think most of our users are still toll-centric, but I think over the recent 6 months, it's been very much retail-driven. E-Tunai Rakyat obviously has been a boon for Touch and Go e-wallet. But I think the behavior of the e-wallet is now getting more and more retail-centric, which is good. So when we eventually allow more users into RFID, people have more options, not just with the e-wallet. We're going to make sure that open payments takes place, so other wallets or other forms of payments will also be allowed to access the RFID platform. So in the end, consumers win. Consumers have all the choice they want, and then they can decide who they want.
You see, this particular battle, right? It's like it's not like, if I could liken it, it's not like World War II where there's a clear front line, and then Germany's on this side, France on this side, and then you can see the war. It's more, for this particular battle, I would liken it more like a Vietnam War where there's no lines, right? Everybody's everywhere. You have incumbents like Maybank. You have new entrants like money exchange or money business services coming into this foray, and you have non-players. Telco even is coming into this space. You're going to see a lot of people. They're like your competitors, but they are also very essentially your partners as well. How do you navigate through this mess? I mean, this is really tricky in terms of rolling out a business like yours, right?
It's complicated, and that's why touch and go at the holding level is always needing to be very agnostic, because we have to play and compete at various stages of our business evolution, right? So on one hand, payments is becoming saturated, so people have decided where and how they want to pay, with whom they want to pay with. But a lot of the wallets will need to evolve now, and we need to evolve in very different ways, whether they increase the number of use cases or they start evolving into a digital bank, for example, at some stage. But for us at Touch and Go, our focus is on mobility and data. How do we work with all parties to make their customers happier with the use of infrastructure that we are enabling? So for the last 3 years, we've been engulfed in payment issues as opposed to mobility issues. And today, Malaysians are guided by Twitter and Waze as their main two arsenal of tools, when a lot of the data that can be provided is provided by us, but we never do that because we always do that through our partners. So now we're intending to create a much more open platform for our data to flow, but more towards giving them benefits in terms of travel advisory, safety, managing congestion, managing their journey time. So this becomes a lot more data enriched as a process. So then as a result, people will then say, okay, now I'm getting value. Now the payments partners can also create more value adding services on top of that.
Okay, the National Automotive Policy was launched by the previous government a few months ago, and of course now it's going to be carried forward into this government. The ministry in question is, of course, Azmin Ali's ministry, the MITI. And here, the biggest break, I guess, from NEP 2020 versus NEP 2014 is that they are not just solving the automobile sector or the automotive sector, it's actually solving mobility.
Yep.
And you have a lot of terms that people really need to get used to. MaaS is one of them, mobility as a service. Electric vehicles is also one of them. Automotive vehicles. We're looking at improving local content. Places like Kulim, for instance, is going to be a big deal. We know that manufacturers like BMW, like Toyota, many others, they are now trying to break away from them being a car company into a mobility company.
Correct.
A lot of things are happening right now. Do you consider Touch and Go to be in the fray, right in the middle of it, and in the crossfire and trying to solve all these problems, or you guys are still trying to enter the market and approach it, teethingly and tiptoeing around the issue? Which one are you?
Actually, we're right in the median of all those discussions, right? So, for example, we work with manufacturers to see how our data can be infused into their vehicle information system. As we pivot into 5G, we're not talking about IoT for the sake of IoT. We're talking about vehicle-to-vehicle communication. And who are they communicating with? They're communicating with devices out there in the highways, making sure that they're getting feedback, right? So it's not just a one-source reliance on, say, just Waze or Google, but it's also reliance on other information that's being transmitted from different devices, right? So that's one part of it, and Touch and Go is going to be involved in that. Second, as you recently heard, we have also done a joint venture with Shell, looking into how we could enable RFID fueling. So fueling that doesn't involve people going through the normal route of taking their card out and using the same RFID tag to identify them and to allow them to fuel their cars.
Yeah.
So the more we get into this sort of no hands situation where the cars are actually more intelligent in dealing with devices out there on the highways, the more we move into mobility as a service. So mobility as a service is the use of data to enable services that can be permeated away from just the mobile phone into the cars and other devices that people can then access and say, hey, so this is smart enough to allow me to access the service, and I'm going to get it, and someone's going to provide that.
So the core stakeholders that you got to deal with is some of the major players, like for instance Plus and Shell and all the other guys.
Correct.
Now you're going to move into retail, so your customer acquisition team, client acquisition team,
Exactly.
is going to be very aggressive. Has to be.
We're
right?
looking at housing developments, drive-thrus, anything that allows the car. So actually the center part of mobility, as we're talking about highway, is the car. Actually, the car is the most important part because the car moves, goes into all these places, but everybody talks to you on your phone, but actually the car needs to be intelligent enough to be able to get somebody's data and then feed you with the right notifications as time goes by. So from mobile, we go into the car as the conduit in the future.
Which is essentially mobile as well.
It's mobile as well, exactly. But but it's safer, so you don't sort of text and drive at the same time. You know, so
sorry, I do that one. There's also the element of government, because right now it's a little bit clearer in terms of who does what and the personalities involved. I would reckon somebody like Touch and Go would require close contact with MOF, which is of course helmed by Tengku Zafrul. We know Tokpa is dealing with EPU, or whatever that is called now, Menteri Jabatan Perdana Menteri Economy, and Mustafa Muhammad is driving that. MITI, of course, we're talking about mobility. Few personalities involved. What do you think of these personalities driving this? Certainly, they're not new to governance. They have been there. They have governed. What's your take on that?
Well, I guess I wouldn't comment too much on this, but I think safe to say that all of them would be looking towards building a better Malaysia to solving some of the problems we have. So in the case of transportation, for example, there's a lot of pre-work done already in the past. So I think now is the time to get things done rather than planning other things. So for example, today for highways, it's really about unblocking congestions in certain parts, certain events that allow people to move seamlessly. So people want more of that than trying to create new things per se, right? So that's one part of it. Public transport, I think, requires a lot more, paradigm shift in terms of how people think about mobility. So a lot of people still are in the rut that, if you based on our data, the growth in public transport has been very minimal. It's like 1 or 2% in terms of new users, and partly because people think that it isn't the last mile. People don't want to walk too much, and so the lifestyle of public transport needs to be recast, and maybe recast in the light of maybe Mosti, for example, with YBKJ, in the sense that it's a more green way of traveling. You cut the carbon footprint. You get healthier. So we need to build new narratives rather than take old ones, especially as we try to get millennials and the new generation to adopt a lifestyle that is different.
Okay, see, this is what I'm trying to get at, changing behaviors, which is not as easy as you think. This is consumer-driven, this is business. At the same time, you want people to behave in a way where it's not just good for them, but it's profitable for you guys.
Correct.
It's going to be a long haul on this one, and the narrative that you say is going to be important for them to set. And people like you as well, to set a new narrative.
Correct.
What do you think will be some of the challenges in terms of getting people to change their behavior?
I think we have to work closely with the policymakers. I think the key thing in things like mobility, as you rightly pointed out, there's so many different ministries involved, and we need to take the challenge of communicating with all these ministries to see what is good from a consumer point of view. So what I would like to do is share a lot more of my data with the ministries, and to show them that we need to be driven by data as opposed to hunches or experiences. Data tells us a different story all the time.
Yeah. And it defies, conventional knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. It always defies logic, right?
Yeah.
I'll share some data, for example, right? Today on the highways, we have more than 70% of users who own cars, right? And so what you see is that every year we grow by 5% of new vehicles. So we know that we're a driving nation. Yeah. Right? And
but hang on, but the number has been slowing down.
It is.
Frost and Sullivan
but
has said that
it's still
it's growing.
It's growing,
but it was not like
it's not massive growth, but it's still growing,
it's
right?
Tapering,
On the contrast, when you look at public transport, one of the biggest pain points they face is that 58% of people don't want to take public transport because they feel that the data that is available for public transport is not clear. So when the bus is under maintenance, they don't know the timing. So there's a lot of this, what I call communication or data issues that really affects people's mindset about the regularity of services, right?
Because if you get into the car, you know exactly what time you're going to get there.
That's right.
And even if there's a ways, whatever,
that's right,
there's a delay, you know.
That's right. So I think data needs to stitch all these mobility options so that it depends on budget, depends on time, depends on your requirements. People can make the right choices, and then we can push the right narrative to them.
But the government wants people to take public transportation. They're spending billions into it. MRT2, MRT3.
Agreed. But then I think that's only the infrastructure part. I think the education, the excitement, the lifestyle element, there's still a lot to do there, And I think even those with a lower budget, they're still taking, ride-hailing, for example,
basically still cars.
They
Right?
still take cars, and I think people value the freedom and the flexibility of time. And to me, data is the only solution to that. You can only get flexibility once you have certainty of how and when things can happen for you on mobility, and that's key.
Right, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss on how Touch 'n Go is actually leveraging on data moving forward. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on with us. I am Ibrahim Sani. You're watching Notepad. I have with me Syahrunizam Samsudin, the CEO of Touch 'n Go. Plenty of things that we're discussing right now, but if there's one thing that I can take away from the earlier segment is that data is everything.
Yep.
It's as if that is the purpose of your existence right now, and everything else builds around data.
That's right.
Which begs the question: do you have the necessary requirements, the necessary people, necessary talent, the necessary technology to make data work for you? Where do you stand in terms of getting the best out of data for your company?
Right now, it's still a very much work in progress, right? We know we have a lot of data. That's not in question now. But trying to build that talent to work through this data and the technology we have, we are working with partners in building that technology stack. But I think the more important thing is getting the right local talent to work through the data, and then partnering with people where the data can be transmitted for value. So we could work with app providers who are already having customers, whether wallets, mobile banking apps, whether it's traveling apps. So we're working with all forms of mobility app providers to allow our data to be transmitted where it will add value to the user. So, for example, we're working with a few travel apps where local travel via car, right, can be incentivized with merchants that are along the highway, for example, to allow people to access deals or journey plans that will suit their budget when they're traveling in the car, because everything is sort of focused with airlines, right? So that's more of the pivot we're making. So we're working through digital marketing to basically put all these things together.
What about using machine learning and making this a little bit more automated in terms of finding the best?
With ML, I think ML is much more back-ended for us rather than front-ended for now, because we feel that machine learning works well with repetitive tasks or things that are, I guess, more certain. But I think as we deal with customer and customer behavior, we still need to have analysts look through and analyze different types of situations and scenarios. Maybe not now, but maybe in a year or two, maybe when we have more data, we could probably lock that into ML in the front end. But the back end, we're already using it.
So what's the challenges moving forward? Is it getting the necessary analysts to be, attuned to what the consumer wants?
No, I think the most important challenge is, can we monetize this data? I mean, people always say that, oh yeah, we got all this data, we're going to provide it, but then the question is, how do you monetize it? Do you create ad tech and go into advertising, or do you work through with merchants and say, because of this data, we create a new product, and then the customers will get to pay for a better product in the future? This is the new dilemma for a lot of data and tech companies. How do you create a future monetization? But
there's also the ethical element to it, right?
Of course.
Privacy is a big
correct,
deal.
Correct. And I think we're not even dealing with private information. We're dealing with transaction information as opposed to personal information, right? So the idea is to look at behaviors and identify behaviors that could potentially be something that consumers want. But I think within that ethical boundary, the idea is, what is that new business model? And I think for people like Touch 'n Go, we have to look at platforms like Waze, Google, platforms that allow people to access data, but not necessarily be charged for it, but then find a way to monetize that in the future.
Yeah, so data is a toe into the conversation, but you find monetization elsewhere, transaction basis or whatever.
Correct.
So do you think that can happen right now, or still it's
No, I think there's a great potential.
Cash
like for example, right? How do you create enhanced monetization on the highways, for example? Today we are using pay-per-use. Every time you use, you pay. But what if we had a subscription model for highways? What if people were given a weekly pass to go into certain highways, and for that weekly pass they pay a fixed rate? And what if we do the same for parking as well? You know, open parking, you have a monthly season rate that you can use anywhere in Putrajaya. How cool is that? So what we're trying to do is, how do we create data points that will allow products that will be beneficial to you, rather than every time I go to a place I have to pay this 3 ringgit or 4 ringgit an hour, right? So what we want to do is look at all the white spaces in these monetization of infrastructure to basically offer to other people that didn't know that they could actually have this, and take up that product.
So this is very bizarre, right? Think about it. I'm already paying subscription for some stuff, right? So for whatever, for streaming services, for even Astro. I mean, this is a subscription service right there. But I haven't seen this being translated to other services that I use.
Correct.
Parking is going to be. It should be easy to roll out. Think about it, right?
Well, I mean, if you think of, let's say we exist in KLCC Parking, Pavilion, and Mid Valley. What if we created a parking pass that allows the 3 malls to be connected, right?
What's stopping people from doing this? I'm sure this is
right
has
now,
been thought of.
Yeah, well, because of the integration of data and the ownership structure. So what we are the common element, right? So what we could do is create a product that allows each of them to see the value of that, and using the data of transactions, we can then say to them, hey, look, we can get more customers if we do this.
This is real disruption. No?
Yeah, so this is the kind of disruption that we are looking for, right?
But you're not going to make a lot of friends if you do it this way. I mean, not just parking, everything, right?
Yeah, so basically the idea is to reduce the layering between us and the consumer, so that the consumers get to access the infrastructure the way they should be accessing it, right? In fractions or in subscription models that allow them that flexibility, right? So yeah, transport through mobility as a service requires you to fractionalize these services into subscription models, and that's the way we do it.
This is fantastic. This is crazy.
That should be the way we should be thinking about it, right?
Yeah. Some car companies are also thinking about doing the same. Some of them are actually doing it literally right now, and to various degrees of success. Do you think that subscription basis on all services, whether you use for parking or for whatever, toll, highway, whatever, that's going to be the way forward, moving forward? If it's not you doing it, somebody else has to do it.
In mobility,
it's an inevitable thing.
I think it's almost certain that a lot of things in mobility are moving that way. Cars are on subscription models. Even car sharing is now on very much subscription. And when you see kids actually on the weekends trying to book a BMW from a car sharing app,
yes,
for a 2-hour date with their girlfriend, right? For $100, and they're happy to do it.
Yes.
And now they're looking for, hey, what are the things that I can do in 2 hours with my girlfriend with this BMW? And so you have to create new value propositions around that 2 hours, as opposed to days or weeks, right? So this is the new thought process of mobility. And so if you pay for that 2 hours, then the contrast is, would you take a train? You wouldn't, because the experience is completely different. Right? Then I got to create a new experience for trains. Like how would you create the experience with trains, for example? So everything that we talk about now requires data and digital marketeers to sort of be creative about how we design a lifestyle with this mobility function.
So this is where the stakeholder conversation is important, because I don't think it will be a tough sell for you to impress upon merchants and retailers to work with you to deliver this kind of proposition. However, when you talk about government and policymakers, they might want to see stability. They might not even understand what you're trying to build, because by virtue of them being government, they're not meant to make profit. They're just here to protect the interests of the people. How do you think working with government moving forward, and also other policymakers and regulators, is going to be like? Is it going to be a tough sell for these guys?
I think what they could do is to continue to support private sector engagement with consumers by allowing a lot more latitude for people like Touch and Go and other players to create new propositions for the customer, as opposed to driving it.
What kind of latitude are you looking at?
One that allows private sector to pull their data together to deliver something that is unique for the consumers, as opposed to having a top-down approach saying, okay,
this is it.
This is what we have to do, right? Because the idea of building infrastructure and this is how we have to do in a consumer environment that is so flexible and changes all the time, it needs data, is completely difficult to manage, right? So if you
and you sometimes don't even understand why you're doing it, because it doesn't make sense for you or to you.
Correct. So like for example, we find that 45% of our highway users now are millennials. Now, millennials want different things from the highways, and we can't have a standard policy for them, which applies to all the baby boomers or the Gen X. So now we have to do segmentation, and that segmentation cannot be a top-down policy driven. It has to be an industry sort of, let's do this to support the consumers, right?
Before we end, we have to end soon.
Sure,
But,
no worries.
Before we end, what's your take on electric vehicles? Is it going to be the next big thing? And if so, say for instance, you need more chargers, along the highway?
I think it's a now thing. I think we should actually promote it more. But somehow I find that it's sort of fizzled. It's like fizzling out in Malaysia, but it's not so much in other countries. I mean, I go to China a lot before, and everything is electric. I mean, everything,
even
bikes,
buses, whatever.
Everything is electric, right? I think the proliferation of charging is one, but I think.
By the way, you don't have COVID, right? Because you.
No. I do have an electric scooter. But I think the way that a lot of people look at electric is more on the lifestyle, and I think MOSTI needs to maybe work with MOT to really look at how do you create an electric lifestyle, electric vehicle lifestyle, right? Yeah. I don't think we've done enough here. Again, it's a study of consumers as opposed to policy. Yeah. It's like trying to get people to I just want to share a short story. I mean, I was riding my electric scooter and one day 2 police officers stopped me just to ask. They said, "Your bike doesn't make a noise." You know what I mean?
Because
because it's electric. Because I see it's electric. I said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, it's electric." Yeah, it's like so because he's going fast. I'm like, I can't go any faster than this, right? Capacity, but that's really the beauty of it, right? And 100-kilometer range, and you charge it when it's finished, and then it's done. And,
so the millennials are owning the world. They are the bigger user right now. They understand this a little bit better. What does this spell like for Gen X baby boomers?
I think we have to give way and start facilitating and bridging the emergence of this new generation so that they are able to drive the next level change. It's always nice for us to say we're going to help it change, but actually the reality is a lot of us don't really understand what's needed, but we can help build that bridge. Yeah. We're good connectors, but to say that we will be able to solve it, I don't think we're able to, because we need a lot more of these guys to start taking the lead, right?
So you're calling for more millennials to take on greater leadership roles.
Exactly, and I think more baby boomers and Gen X generation, people like me, to be able to understand data, to understand technology, and how we can actually shape a future with them. Yeah, taking the lead, right? And that's tough. And I mean, it's like us playing. I was playing soccer last weekend, and we all thought we were still 17 again when we hit the turf. But in reality, we're not. And we can't even get past the halfway line without panting. So that's where we are right now. Yeah. All of us are panting.
You know how the game works. You know what's best for the game. So that's where you guide.
Correct. Right. And I think that's what we all have to do. Government, private sector, whatever. We just have to bite our tongues and say, hey, let's do it this way. It's tough.
Right. Go leaders. That was my conversation with Syahrunizam Samsudin, the CEO of Touch 'n Go. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to astro.com, look for Notepad. Plenty of interviews like this can be found over there. We're also on the Google Play and Apple App Store in terms of the Apple app and also Google app. You can watch these kind of interviews there on your mobile devices. And of course, we're also on podcast. Big thing, big deal. Millennials are everywhere on podcasts, so if you want to pretend to be a millennial, listen to this interview on your podcast. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Goodbye. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
That was very good.